Okay, so after spending more time with Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles Remastered, I have realized that one of the biggest complaints that everybody has against this game, the fact that only the match host gets credit for beating the dungeon in the form of the Myrrh drop at the end of the level, yeah, that complaint is completely unfounded. If that is your biggest complaint about this game, I've realized that that's not even how this game is structured. So I was at fault for this too. We can blame it on Crystal Chronicles' obscureness and the fact that really not that many people played it and played it to its completion, or even played it enough to get a good understanding of the systems. But if you were like me, you think this game plays like this. You're in a caravan with your buddies. You're out to save the world and collect Myrrh drops. There are 13 or 14 dungeons in this game. You've got to beat them all and collect all the drops before you can face the final boss. So yeah, that sounds like it sucks because if you're playing with a group of different friends online and only the host gets credit for the dungeon, then you've got to run through the dungeon 3 more times with everybody else hosting so that everybody can get credit and progress to the final boss. So that's a logical but incredibly false understanding of the game. So in actuality, the game runs in years. You need 3 drops to complete 1 year and keep your town safe for that 1 year. And then the next year, you set out to complete the task again. And to actually complete the game, you need to be on year 5. So effectively, you'll have to have collected 12 Myrrh drops. The problem is that the Myrrh you collected from the dungeons closest to you are now not collectible because you've harvested them already. So you need to venture out further to collect the precious lifeblood that's going to keep your village safe. You can venture out further and further in order to complete this task, but there's also another catch. After 2 years, Myrrh that you've collected regenerates, so you're able to go back to previous dungeons instead of venturing out further. So why is that important? Well, it tells me that this game is not supposed to be a straight line. While it is possible to beat the game within 5 years, there's tons of evidence showing that you're not supposed to. So first off, there's the artifact system. You collect artifacts and those are your permanent character upgrades. You don't level up by collecting experience. You'll find artifacts either by defeating enemies or in treasure chests. And at the end of the run, everyone in your party gets to pick from the ones you've collected. You're only allowed to pick 1 artifact, and you also cannot select one that you've already selected before. So if you've previously selected Shuriken to add +1 strength, you can't select it again to get another +1 strength. You actually have to look for a different artifact that gives you strength benefit. So that means there is only a certain amount of leveling up you can actually do, and that is based on the number of artifacts there are in the game. So with, let's say there's 14 levels, and you can only get 1 artifact per run, how many artifacts do you think are present in the game? There are over 70, some of which are only obtainable through boss drops. So this tells me that if you only run every dungeon once, you are going to be completely underleveled for the later dungeons, which is a common complaint I've heard. The fact that the later levels get immensely harder. Also, another reason why I know you're supposed to run dungeons multiple times is because the dungeons actually level up. If you notice, there's an icon next to the dungeon. After it levels up, it'll actually get a second icon next to it. These are called cycles, and certain artifacts can only be obtained in specific cycles of dungeons. It is possible to miss certain artifacts because you miss certain cycles. So actually it turns out the ability to jump into other people's games online and rerun cycles that they're still on but you have actually passed is actually an attribute. Like, think about it. If there's 70 artifacts total and you can only get 1 artifact per dungeon run, and assuming that you're able to get the artifact that you need every time you run a dungeon, so assuming that you don't get a duplicate or that you get the rare drop when you need it, or that somebody else doesn't take it, you're going to need to run a minimum of 70 dungeons in order to get all the upgrades, which is far more than the 13 or so drops of Myrrh needed to complete the game. Now maybe you're saying, well David, I'm not a completionist, I don't want to get every single artifact. And that's fine, but my original argument still stands. I don't think the game is meant to be played one time through, every dungeon once, collect the drop of Myrrh for everyone in your party, and then go beat the last boss. I think this is more of a dungeon run game, where you complete the dungeons to try to get the best loot drops. The dungeons upgrade and get harder, giving you another reason to run through them again. The number of years are actually inconsequential, as are the Myrrh drops. It's just a plot device to keep the narrative going. There's no actual year cap, and there's no actual limit on Myrrh drops as they keep regenerating. So all these complaints about, well, I don't get credit for the Myrrh if I don't host the game, Dude, the Myrrh is not even the most important part. The character upgrades are. Those are the ones who are limited and finite. And those you do get to keep, even if you play in somebody else's game. And it's also probably a good reason why everybody doesn't get Myrrh for one dungeon. Remember, everybody has their own world, okay? Every 3 drops of Myrrh you complete a year. If you're on year 2 and I'm on year 5, and we ran a couple random dungeons together, and we both got credit for the Myrrh, then wouldn't we be unnecessarily running up our year counter? Suddenly you're on year 3 and I'm on year 6, but your dungeon may or may not have had the Meer regenerated yet, or you got credit for a dungeon that's not yet open in your game yet. I mean, I'm pretty sure that's going to throw off the balance in the game and throw off the counters. It's going to break certain elements, ones that were used to keep a player from progressing into an area they weren't ready for yet. These are done in the form of miasma streams, which are set to a certain element and changed year to year. The game is perfectly in balance because it can manage which Myrrh drops are available to the player and make sure that the player doesn't change the element to something which they can't progress through. So again, that's why it's a good idea that everybody doesn't just willy-nilly get credit for every Myrrh drop they collect online. It's the actual system that allows you or doesn't allow you to progress into certain areas. I mean, there's a part in year 5, I don't want to spoil anything, but Jagon River dries up and certain parts of the game become inaccessible. So if I'm collecting Myrrh from other people's games, I'm going to hit year 5 pretty quick. And maybe Square Enix didn't want that to happen to someone accidentally because they played online with some people. So it's really disappointing because every time I've talked to somebody about this game, they all say, well, I read a review that said that the online isn't handled very well and that I don't get credit for blah 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 blah. Dude, the game is not designed that way. It makes me wonder if these people who reviewed the game even played the game. Because it becomes pretty evident as soon as you start playing that certain things that people are complaining about are missing the point entirely. I've enjoyed the game immensely. I've put in about 3 hours every night since this game came out. Everybody I've played with have been surprised. They're like, oh wow, this is pretty fun. Yes, we've had to rerun dungeons, but I'm happy to help them get their Myrrh, especially since it's helping me get my artifacts. I've ran about 14 or 15 dungeons now, but I'm still only on year 3. Which is good because I don't want to advance the story in my own game yet. I want to stay in the lower levels and get all the artifacts and stuff before they become missable. And I'm telling you right now, I'm probably going to get every artifact in the game because there's a trophy for getting every artifact. Which again means that I'm probably going to be running a lot of dungeons over again. But I mean, that's a shame, right? If only there was a reason for me to run old dungeons again. Oh, I know. I can help other people get their drops of Myrrh, which they don't get credit for unless they host in their own game. Seems like a pretty balanced and well thought out game design, doesn't it? Who would have thought, especially considering all the negative reviews and press and hate this game is getting. Look, if you don't want to play a dungeon runner loot drop game, that's fine. But don't hate the game, hate the player. I'm out. Peace. Oh shit, there's another one. Oh my god. That's pretty awesome, dude. That's pretty awesome. They walked over there and was like... Here comes His Majesty. Ayah! Dude, what the fuck? He's got some sort of